Good afternoon. I'm Richard Kincaid, and I recently joined Healios as CFO after a 20-year career in the financial industry in Asia. And I first worked at Goldman Sachs, and then for many years at a major hedge fund in the region. And I joined Healios for a couple of reasons. I joined the industry for a couple of reasons. And one is our mission. Healios is transforming lives through the power of regenerative medicine. So it's a big goal, big audacious goal. I saw that Healios was doing good and important work to fulfill this mission. But what really drew me to the company was our founder, CEO, and majority shareholder, Dr. Hardy Kagimoto, who is sitting in the audience. For those of you who know Hardy, you know he's a visionary leader and a driving force in the regenerative medicine industry. And I'm humbled and honored to be on his team. And I just want to make sure I mention him at the outset because he's such a key part of the Healios story and about what makes Healios a truly special company. But under Hardy's leadership, Healios has developed many strengths. He hasn't made himself redundant by any stretch of the imagination yet, but Healios has many strengths, and I'd like to focus on those today. And first, it's our strategy. This is rooted in us being based in Japan and having Japanese expertise, but also being a first mover in the IPS space. And there are two legs to this strategy. One is we're commercializing late-stage licensed-in assets in Japan to bring treatments to patients faster, but also to create valuation uplift and cash for the company. And second, we're taking everything that comes with that to invest in and build out a world-leading innovative IPS technology platform. Now, importantly, we're doing this in Japan, which has the most favorable regulatory framework in the world for regenerative medicine. And Healios is and is going to continue to be the most proactive operator in the industry to leverage this framework for patients, ourselves, and our business partners. Now, today we have two pivotal studies going on to two near-term catalysts for the company. This is based on a product we've licensed in from Athersys called MultiStem. And we're addressing both ischemic stroke and acute respiratory distress syndrome, or ARDS. And we have skills in trial design and regulatory process in Japan that have allowed us to optimize these trial structures to maximize the probability of a successful outcome. Now, over the medium term, our focus is on building out an innovative IPS technology platform. And underlying this is gene-edited stem cell technology that we're nearing completion of. And using this technology, we're going to be applying it across a number of domains that we've been working on for many years. And this includes the eye space, organ buds, and immuno-oncology. And finally, this is all supported by an experienced and diverse leadership team and very strong financial resources, which I'll touch on later in the presentation. So this is our pipeline as currently disclosed. You can see the two pivotal studies that I mentioned in stroke and ARDS. On the IPS side, we have efforts in the eye. We have efforts in liver disease using our organ bud platform. But we've been making progress in the IPS side, and we're going to be updating this pipeline in the not-too-distant future. I want to say a couple words about the regulatory system because it's important to how we operate. Right? It's called the Conditional and Time-Limited Authorization System. And so in Japan, when you run a clinical trial, you have to prove out safety as you would in any context. But when it comes to efficacy, if you demonstrate presumed effectiveness, you can get something called conditional or early approval, start selling your product, get reimbursement, build out your data set, and optimize your treatment approach over time. So that can last like 7 years or up to 7 years. And so while we're going to go for robust efficacy in all cases, as an operator out there, what this does is it significantly de-risks the clinical trial process. And so it's from our perspective, it's very supportive, and it allows us to be a little bolder and take more risk than otherwise. Now, I mentioned we have two pivotal studies using MultiStem. MultiStem is a de-risked somatic stem cell product that has a proven record of safety and efficacy. And I won't go into a lot of detail about it, but you can see this is from Athersys' phase 2 study in the US. This is an ischemic stroke, and this is data from patients that were treated within 36 hours of stroke onset. You can see that they hit statistical significance both at day 90 and at the 1-year mark. Right? And using this data, we built out a 220-patient double-blind study in Japan for ischemic stroke patients who can be treated within 36 hours of onset. We have 41 sites open today where we're actively enrolling, and we're making good progress on the trial. It's going very well. As you all know, stroke is a very big indication globally, and it's a big unmet medical need. It's very true in Japan. There are about 62,000 patients that we're specifically targeting, which are stroke patients who have severe strokes, and we can treat within 36 hours of onset. And there are two things we're trying to achieve with this. One, we're bringing a more effective product to market, but two, we're extending that treatment window out substantially from what's currently about 8.5 hours, given current therapies, out to 36 hours. And we're going to be able to treat far more patients that way, patients who don't have a lot of in the way of choice of effective product today. And there are some competitors going into the stroke space in Japan, but they're focused mostly on chronic stroke, and they're generally behind us. So there's a takeaway with respect to stroke that I want to leave you with today. It's that Healios is in pole position to build out a stroke franchise in Japan, in this big market. We're both further along in our phase 3, and we're addressing the most acute phase of stroke. We believe doctors are going to treat patients as quickly as they can to prevent that secondary damage that we're trying to stop in its tracks with this treatment. Now, moving quickly on to ARDS, we're very excited about this indication for a number of reasons. This is Athersys' phase 1-2 data from their double-blind study in the US and the UK. If you just look at the data on the right-hand side, this is data for patients that were treated that look most like the patients that we're treating in our study. These are pneumonia-induced ARDS patients with severe ARDS. And while this study was not geared for efficacy, the data is certainly indicative of that. And if you look at mortality and other metrics like ventilator-free days or ICU-free days, the multi-stem treated patients did much better than those that got placebo. Now, our trial in Japan is a 30-patient open-label study that is treating pneumonia-induced ARDS patients with severe ARDS. 20 are getting the treatment, 10 are getting standard therapy, so there's no placebo involved. I think the trial structure and various decisions we made help demonstrate how we optimize structure in Japan. One is choosing pneumonia-induced ARDS. We expect to get cleaner data that way. And as a primary endpoint, we chose ventilator-free days, again, to kind of get the cleanest possible data. And it's a small study, 30 patients. We've opened over 20 sites, and so we're moving fast. We've also applied for orphan designation, and we're close to getting the result of that in the next month or two. So with all these things, including the Athersys data, there's some reasonable probability that we can get a full approval based on this one small study in Japan. And if not, the conditional approval path is very much there for us. And the reason we should all get excited about this treatment for ARDS is it's a massive unmet medical need. Severe ARDS patients, more than half of them are dying. In Japan, there are about 10,000 patients a year. And so we're excited to, in part fulfill our mission in bringing this product forward and making an impact on these patients. From a commercial perspective, we don't provide revenue projections, but whether it's stroke or whether it's ARDS, products like this that have come to market in Japan have been pricing at something like $100,000 to $150,000 per treatment. So I'll let you all do the math as to what that could mean commercially for Healios. Now, between stroke and ARDS, Healios is well on its way to turning itself into a commercialized pharmaceutical company in Japan with all the muscle that comes with that. But at the beginning and still today, we are at the core an IPS company. And back in 2015, we were the first company to build a globally approvable GMP IPS line. We have 130 people, 90 of whom are in our Kobe operation, who are focused on developing out IPS therapies. Right? And so we're committed to this, but if you're going to be committed to the IPS space, we think you need to have a gene-modified stealth cell line, and we've been building one and we're very close to completing it. And we haven't disclosed much about how we do this, but here's a graphic that kind of shows how, and we knock out HLA class 1 and class 2 molecules, and then we knock in certain genes to improve immune evasion and also to add a suicide gene as a kill switch. And of course, the goal is to remove the need for immunosuppression for the treatments that we're developing and the heavy patient burden that comes along with that. Now, many of you may know us for the RP technology that we've been working on in our co-development with Dai Nippon Sumitomo Pharma. So in the eye space, that's one of the projects that we've had. And they're moving forward with that, bringing it forward to commercialize it in Japan. In the liver space, some of you may know us for our organ bud technology where we have global exclusive rights. And that's going into first-in-human testing in the next year through our academic partners in Japan. But in both the eye and in organ buds, we're making various investments and have various efforts to bring these into the next generation and expand them out. But underlying it, a key goal is to integrate with our existing technologies, the stealth cell technology that we've developed. Conscious of time, so I'm going to skip some slides, but I've talked a little bit about the eye, talked a little bit about the organ bud platform, and this extends beyond the liver, right? In the immuno-oncology space, we have not disclosed much, but what I'll disclose today or say is that we have 30 people in our Kobe operation who are focused on developing next-generation immunotherapies for solid tumors. And it's a project that we're very excited about, and we hope to be able to disclose more in the coming months and quarters. Now, I said at the beginning that Hardy's really key to the team, but he has systematically built out a team around him, both to establish really strong governance and leadership, but also to put Healios into a position to achieve its goals, not just in Japan, but globally. And so you can see the faces, there's a lot of diversity here. On the one hand, Healios has the experience and expertise and execution capability of a Japanese pharma company, right? And that positions us to make this transition into one that we have happening to us right now. On the other hand, though, we have the speed and flexibility and entrepreneurial drive of a company that you're much more likely to see here in California than you are in Tokyo. And by combining those two cultures in the same firm, what Hardy has achieved is he's put Healios in a position to do things that rarely can be done by certainly most Japanese companies, and I think, given all of our strengths, potentially globally. And then from a financial resources perspective, we're in a very strong position. So I'll mention a few things. Hardy founded the company in 2011. He did one round for $30 million in 2013. He then quickly listed the company in 2015. That was the next raise. All in, we've raised over $300 million since inception. Today, we have about $200 million on the balance sheet. We burn about $10 to $15 million per quarter. That's our projection. The number is really closer to 10, and so we're really well financed versus our needs. And we recently did a cap raise for $120 million, and that was led by Goldman Sachs. And it was a mix of equity and convertible debt, but the CB marked the first time that a pre-revenue biotech company in Japan issued a zero-coupon convertible bond to global investors. And I think this says a couple things about Healios. One, it says something about our position in the capital markets in Asia. This is a global deal, but it was investors that invest in Asian companies. And second, it says something about Healios' equity story. For global, sophisticated investors who looked under the hood, kicked the tires, we were able to do a very efficient capital raise for Healios. Now, in conclusion, these are the same strengths that I listed up earlier on in the deck. So I won't repeat them and bore you all to death any more than I've already done. But I will say this, that Healios has a big, bold mission. We have a visionary founder and leader who's as dynamic as they come, and we have a ton of strengths and resources. And so I think the conclusion that I'd like you all to draw is that Healios is really well positioned to be and remain at the forefront of regenerative medicine for many years to come. Thank you very much for your time.